I know what I'm watching here, but the other team is 58-22. And if we're going to be doing the power rankings, I'm still going to go with the team that is off to a historic first 80 games.
And Tim Kirchin covers baseball for ESPN. Tim, how you doing today?
Okay, I did the Red Sox game yesterday against the Rays on the radio, and then I jumped in the car and drove home from Boston last night because the flights were so bad. I couldn't risk it, so I just drove from Boston to home. That was about 470 miles.
And I could hear, when I asked you what you want to talk about, I could hear the disappointment in your voice, and maybe there's some weariness built in there too. When you said, yeah, I want to talk about that triple play from last night. Well, Tim, we had that all lined up, okay? Because I knew you would want to talk about it. Here's what it sounded like in a game between the Twins and the White Sox.
And the 0-2 pitch, a fly ball, right center field deep. Byron going back, still going. That ball is going to be caught by Buxton at the fence, and the White Sox are going to run themselves out of the inning if the Twins pick up the baseball. Urshela tags it, grabs the runner there, steps on first, and now that's going to be a triple play.
Corey Provis on the Twins radio network. Yeah, Tim, you always love to talk about how every day at a ballpark you might see something you've never seen before. I've never seen an 8-5 triple play, to use the numbers attached to each of the positions, and I don't think we'll ever see it again, Tim.
It's a first in baseball history, Buster. Now, look, I want to be clear about this. I am way too easy on the players. If you can't hit, I get it. If you can't catch a smoking ground ball, I get it. If you can't throw a strike, I get it. But we have the worst base running that I have ever seen in the 42 years I've covered. I wrote 7,000 words on this last year. I could write 10,000 more this year on what we've seen. Buster, if that had happened to me when I was 15 years old, Mr. Keene would have said, you're not going to be playing the rest of this game because you don't deserve to play if you don't understand what to do on that play. First and second, nobody out, and you run yourself into an 8-5 triple play. I just don't understand how the players can be bigger, better, faster than ever and run the bases like that. That is a disgrace that a major league team had a triple play turned on a fly ball to the center fielder.
And it involves Byron Buxton, who I think at this point, Tim, would you agree with me? He's established the fact that, you know what, it's very possible that he can make a great catch in the gap. What do you think?
Kind of the point here, Buster. You got to think the guy's going to catch the ball. So two guys just run with their heads down. Are we not tagging up on second here? Are we not going halfway? What are we doing here? How can this happen in a big league game? The look on Tony La Russa's face was just priceless. Like he couldn't believe what he was watching right in front of him. And again, I've had enough of this base running. I love the game more than anyone, but this is the part of the game that offers no excuse whatsoever to run the bases like that.
Yeah, and look, you can tell from the expressions of the base runners, they had no idea what was going on. They were completely confused. They made a huge mistake. I did love the fact that Gio Urshela, playing third base for the Twins, knew exactly what was going on, and it didn't surprise me that he was in the middle of this, because he's that type of guy.
Right. Thank goodness the defense knew, because sometimes we have terrible base running mistakes and the defense isn't quite sure what to do with the play either. But the Twins did yesterday an 8-5 triple play for a struggling team that needs help, and they run themselves into 3 outs. Just unbelievable.
Agree with me? We may never see an 8-5 triple play again.
I hope we don't, because you should not be leading the show with this, Buster. You tricked me, you ambushed me, but you're right. This has to be discussed because this just can't happen. This is the big leagues.
All right, I want to ask you about the Juan Soto situation for with the Nationals, because this seems to be percolating. Like there's a lot of stuff going on here. We've known for a while that the Nationals are up for sale. We got some resolution the other day about the future status of Mike Rizzo, their general manager, Dave Martinez, their managers. The franchise picks up the options on both guys for 2023. So however, whenever this transition is going to take place, there's some stability there. But the big question being watched by everyone around baseball is, what's going to happen with Juan Soto. There have been a lot of information percolating about Soto, conversations with the Nationals. Is he going to get a contract extension? It's a really difficult time for incoming ownership, because if you're Scott Boras, who represents Juan Soto, and you have a client who's 23 years old and he's already one of the premier hitters in baseball, you have the ultimate leverage. Like if whatever Soto's contract is turns out to be less by a nickel than what Mike Trout got, the $430 million, I'd be shocked. Because if you're Scott Boras, you can just ask for the moon. Yes. You can basically say, look, here's the benchmark that we're going to set for this guy to stay. And I don't know if incoming ownership is necessarily going to want that. And the fact that the information about his negotiations leaked out, Tim, last week, 4 weeks before the trade deadline, that got the attention of a lot of folks with other teams, because they're wondering at some point, if the Nationals can't sign him, they're going to have to put him out on the marketplace the way the Orioles did with Manny Machado. Yes?
Yes, and I just don't see Juan Soto being traded this year, and Mike Rizzo's been pretty adamant about that. But moving forward, this is a fascinating situation, and what makes it even more fascinating and confusing is that Juan Soto's hitting 226. This is one of the best hitters, maybe the best pure hitter in the game right now, hitting 226, and he has more walks than hits. Now, Barry Bonds in 2004 had almost 100 more walks than hits, which was ridiculous. But when you look at the trade market and you think that Nelson Cruz of the Nationals might get traded, Josh Bell might get traded, and now you're left with Juan Soto, who doesn't get much to hit anyway, and it's a really strange situation. And the Nats have to figure this out as quickly as possible, because if they determine he's not coming back there, he's not going to re-sign there, even at $440 million, then they're going to have to look into trading him. And how do you get equal value for a 23-year-old with that kind of talent?
I agree with you. I don't think he'll be traded before August 2nd, Tim, but I also don't rule anything out. When Mike Rizzo came out earlier this year and said, we're not trading Juan Soto, look, Mike Rizzo, led the Nationals to a championship in 2019. He's one of the best at his job in baseball, but he also is kind of like the Secretary of Transportation who answers to somebody else. He's ultimately not the guy who makes a decision on whether or not to give Juan Soto a contract of over, $430 million. And in the end, what Mike Rizzo said in May or early June about trading Juan Soto, he could be overruled at any time. That's the prerogative of ownership. Yes?
Yes. I mean, this is going to be an ownership decision, Buster. I mean, you're going to spend $400 to $500 million on a player. That's going to have to come from ownership beyond anything else. But I'm going to trust Mike Rizzo. I always do on these things. But you're right. If ownership says, hey, let's move him, then that changes the equation. I just don't think the equation's going to get changed during this Major League season.
So we've got only 28 days now until Major League Baseball's trade deadline. And there's no question that a lot of what happens between now and then is going to be shaped by the standings. And it's interesting, Tim, I was thinking about this over the weekend, looking at the National League standings. So much of it is shaped by the polarized nature of each league. For example, when you look at the Philadelphia Phillies right now, they don't look like a playoff team. Bryce Harper's out. They've had issues with depth in their lineup. They're, struggling at shortstop during the course of the year in terms of identifying a long-term solution. And on the other hand, when you look at the National League, there are 6 bad teams. I say that with all due respect, but there are 6 bad teams, which means if you're the Phillies, what you're essentially involved in, if you figure that they're not going to catch the Braves or the Mets, is a battle for a playoff spot with like 5 other teams. It's not like they're competing against this wide swath of clubs, which is why it wouldn't surprise me if you see the Phillies add before the trade deadline, or the Texas Rangers or the Seattle Mariners, because the same dynamic, I think, exists in the American League as well. If you're one of those teams in the middle, you're not competing against a high number of teams, and a lot of those teams are certainly not dynamic.
Yeah, I agree, Buster, and I agree. I can't see the Phillies like cashing it in and saying we're done. We're not going to make the playoffs. Not when they've had a drought like they've had. And I think there are a bunch of teams that are going to say, hey, the wild card teams are not great in either league right now. The Giants are in trouble right now. They've lost 11 out of 14. So yes, the Phillies say we can sneak in and win a wild card if we go and get the right guy. So I'm with you on that. It should be a fascinating trade deadline because with an extra playoff team and not a real paucity. I mean, not a real lot of great teams out there. It'll be really interesting to see what happens.
The team with the greatest need, in my eyes, the contender with the greatest need, the St. Louis Cardinals, who, as we've seen this season play out, they don't know what Jack Flaherty is going to give them the rest of this year. They have an excellent bullpen, the makings of it at least. It seems like they have an excellent everyday lineup with so much depth, but they clearly, in my opinion, and I think in the opinion of a lot of rival evaluators, they have a clear need for a front of the rotation type starter. And when you and I talked in Baseball Tonight on Sunday night, I mentioned that the guy who talked a lot about with other teams in connection with the Cardinals is Frankie Montas, the Oakland pitcher who everyone assumed was going to be traded, at least before he came out of that Sunday start with his velocity going down. We should know more later today about what his state is. He supposedly underwent an MRI yesterday. Maybe the Athletics learned some more about him. But whether it's Montas or Luis Castillo or somebody, the Cardinals need a front of the rotation type guy. Do you think they're the number one team on that list in terms of what contenders need?
I think they're near the top because they're a pretty darn good team, but they need one more pitcher. And with Jack Flaherty's health, and we're just not sure what they're going to get from him. I think Luis Castillo would be the perfect fit for the Cardinals because, again, you add some of the people they've added, you got people excited about their club, and then you fall off a little bit. I think they're going to go get somebody. And Castillo, to me, is at the top of the list right now because of Montas's health issue, but Castillo's stuff is still really, really good. And that changeup plays no matter where he goes.
Okay, sometime in the next 12 hours, we're going to be getting an email from the folks we work for asking us for this week's power rankings. And after what we saw the last week, Tim, I don't know how you turn out a power ranking without having the Houston Astros at number one. And I get it. They're 5.5 games behind the Yankees. But to me, after what they did against the Yankees and the Mets, going 7-2, and then after that unbelievable weekend they had pitching against the Angels, that comeback they had on Monday, Yordan Alvarez delivering again, you're going to pick the Astros at number one, right?
No, I'm going to pick the Yankees number one because they got ambushed on Baseball Tonight the other day on this. And look, I understand. I'm watching the games like you guys are. I saw what the Astros did against those New York teams. I love the Astros, and I love Lance McCullers on his way back. I know what I'm watching here. But the other team is 58-22. And if we're going to be doing the power rankings, I'm still going to go with the team that is off to a historic first 80 games. So do I think the Astros could beat the Yankees in the series right now? Would they be maybe? Of course they could, but I'm still going with the team that has the biggest lead and is 58-22. And if you don't like it, I don't even care anymore.
Well, I'm going to try to pin you down on this. Do you think there's a chance that Houston runs down the Yankees for the number one spot in the American League? Because I do, Tim. They're 5.5 games behind, as I mentioned today. But when you look at strength of schedule, and I got these numbers updated from Paul Amikides this morning, the Yankees have one of the tougher schedules, which makes sense because they're in the American League East, and you got to deal with the Red Sox and the Blue Jays and the Rays and the improved Orioles. But the team that has by far easiest schedule for the rest of the season, the Houston Astros. But I know you're also not a strength of schedule guy.
Well, I have been in the last couple of years a lot more, Buster, because we've been over this. The difference between the bad teams and the good teams, that gap is bigger than I've ever seen. So you start taking on a bunch of bad teams and you're really good, you're going to start beating them up this year, like last year, like the last 5 years. So can the Astros run down the Yankees? Yes, I think they can, because their pitching is so good. McCullers is coming back, and we really have to watch that Yankee pitching the second half of the year with Cortez and Tyone and Montgomery, who haven't had this kind of workload. I love where the Yankees are. I think they're going to win the division easily. But yeah, the Astros are really good right now.
Yeah, coming into the year, one of the big questions about the Yankees was, could their rotation, filled with guys who had injury issues, injury histories, could that group hold together? And their 5 starting pitchers have started 76 of their 80 games, which in baseball in 2022 is almost unheard of, because we see guys goes on the injured list all the time. We'll see if that holds together for the Yankees. Tim, thanks for doing this. Great to see you. Sorry to
All
ambush
right, Buster. Thank you. See you guys.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.